Good afternoon and welcome to About Health. I'm Rona Renner, here twice a month with you to explore different concepts of health and well-being. I'm a nurse, parenting coach, author, and grandma of 5. Today, we're going to discuss how processing past experiences by writing them down on paper lets us see our trauma or adversity in new ways. My guest, Donna Jackson Nakazawa, invites us on a journey of insight and understanding and self-compassion that can lead to healing from childhood experiences. She says that knowledge in and of itself is not enough to change old neural patterns, but she believes that writing can be a powerful process that can change our brain and nervous system and lead us towards recovery from trauma. Adverse childhood experiences, which is referred to as ACEs, have a profound long-term effect on health. Over the last 20 years, there has been a great deal of research exploring the role of ACEs regarding illness and well-being. ACEs are associated with lifelong physical and mental health problems that can begin in childhood or adolescence and persist into adulthood. Some of the health issues can include cardiovascular and pulmonary disease, autoimmune diseases, substance abuse, and depression, just to name a few. Throughout the world, knowledge about the consequences of adverse childhood experiences has shifted policymakers and mental health practitioners towards increasing trauma-informed and resilience-building practices in places like schools, childcare centers, hospitals, workplaces, and homes. We now know that it's never too late to create healthier neural connections and pathways because of the neuroplasticity of our brains. These pathways are the basis of how we think and feel and act and are the foundation of our habits. So today we'll learn about neuroscience-based writing practices to rewire our brains from trauma, and also we'll talk about resiliency while looking at both adverse and positive childhood experiences. My guest is Donna Jackson Nakazawa. She's an award-winning science journalist and author of 8 books exploring the connections between emotion, adversity, and well-being. Her best-selling book, Childhood Disrupted, was a finalist for the Books for a Better Life Award. Her newest book, The Adverse Childhood Experiences Guided Journal, is based on Donna's popular narrative Writing to Heal program called Your Healing Narrative. Donna's other books include Girls on the Brink, Helping Our Daughters Thrive in an Era of Increased Anxiety, Depression, and Social Media, and The Angel and the Assassin, the tiny brain cell that changed the course of medicine. Donna Jackson Nakazawa, welcome back to About Health.
Oh, it's such a delight always to be with you, Rona. Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure. And it was such a pleasure to read your books and interview you over these years. I've learned so much from you, Donna. I'd like to start off today with you telling us about your experiences as a child that's informed a great deal of your writing over the years. You've been very open about your adversity and what you've come to understand about it in regard to your own health.
Well, sure. So when I was 12, we experienced a very sudden and unexpected family tragedy. And I lost my father overnight in a medical accident. He went in for a routine, very simple surgery. There was a mistake and he didn't come home. And we had been sort of a very close family of 6 with a big extended family. His death led to a lot of changes in my environment. My mom was not okay. My father's family, there was a big argument about the family business, and all of a sudden, everyone that I thought I could turn to and rely on literally disappeared. I had my older brothers, and we were very close to this day because we went through a lot. The 4 of us together, we had to really grow up overnight. But I was 12. And growing up overnight when you're 12 is not the easiest thing for the brain.
Right.
Um, so I should just add that by happenstance, I grew up in a newspaper family. My father was a newspaper publisher, and I had really cut my teeth in as a child in that world, and was able to make like small little newspapers of my own with lead type, by the way, which they don't use anymore, in the type, in the typesetting room, and so on and so forth. So words were dear to me and dear to my father as well. And when he died, I didn't have anyone to talk to, and I began filling journals. Not unusual for a 12-year-old girl. But the feeling that I had in that experience of being able to say, here's my pain, here's my loss, here's what I don't understand, here are the questions I have. Hey, Dad, what do you think about this? And being able to have a relationship with words on paper was a salvation for me. And I never forgot that feeling of being able to be seen on paper, even if only to myself. So lo and behold, many, many years later, went to college, went to journalism school, became a journalist, cut my real teeth in the world of New York journalism. But I began to see a lot of studies about the power of writing to heal, and followed the work of the greats, James Pennebaker, who wrote about the incredible power of just writing about emotional concerns for 20 minutes a day. And around this same time, I had a constellation of very serious autoimmune diseases. I was in and out of the hospital. I was raising young children, was literally in the hospital on the anniversary of my father's death, in the same hospital,
Mm.
completely paralyzed. And my father and I share some immune irregularities that played into various things, but nevertheless, sicker than I ought to be at 42. And my kids, a lot of their early memories are of, trying to make my bedroom a fun place, because I would be bedridden or in and out of um, different therapies and treatments for my bone marrow. And so all that is to say that writing to heal is one of the ways that I survived these experiences, both my father's death, my own illness, my worries and feelings of inadequacy as a young mother raising kids who were going through this with me. And fast forward,
Mm.
during the pandemic, we now had a bunch of researchers go and really look at the power of writing to heal, especially when we add in very, very special writing prompts to get to people's experiences and worries and fears, to help them come to these new realizations about the connection between what happened then and
Mm.
how we are responding to the world right now. And we'll talk more
Yeah.
about that.
Yes,
The
definitely.
studies have been so profound. And I think, not just instinctually from my personal experience or even my experience teaching these writing workshops for 7 years, but the science now tells us this is a vastly underutilized tool in the healing toolbox.
Well, thank you for that, Donna. I think people's stories are so valuable to hear, like what happened and how does that relate to, your journey, your path in life, your career, your creativity. So I can imagine how hard that was for you as a teenager to suddenly not have your dad. I want to look at your new book. So, the Adverse Childhood Experience Guided Journal is very different, Donna, than your previous books. You're a science writer and a researcher. And although this book is grounded in proven effective neuroscience practices, it's also about feelings and memories and mindfulness and breathing. So, how did you decide to make this shift from what you had previously written to this kind of guided journal?
Well, the real answer is that a publisher approached me because I had been teaching this program at universities for about 7 years. And so teaching it to behavioral health staff so they could help themselves as practitioners and help the clients or the students who were coming in, teaching it for educators, parents, doctors, teaching it at medical schools, because I had found over time in interviewing thousands and thousands of individuals for the books that you were just talking about, for my like hard science, narrative science books, that something happens when people tell their own story. Something starts to heal and weave together, almost like skin around a wound, by being heard, by being seen, by having the stitching between the past and the present come to make that aha moment. And that when we can do that in the right way, and as someone who's reported on neuroscience for 30 years, I had come to see there were particular ways to help people do that by asking them as a journalist the right questions in the right way at the right time. And watching audiences do this, seeing the change on their faces, has been just one of the greatest gifts of my life.
Mm.
And the work that I do as a science journalist, I go out and I do lectures or keynotes, maybe at children's hospitals or schools or you name it, any kind of health or other organization or corporation or conference. But adding this workshop into the work that I do, based on the knowledge that I have interviewing thousands of individuals who have suffered in life, perhaps childhood, the teen years, young adulthood, maybe later in life, and thousands of patients with chronic conditions, whether they're mental health or mental health concerns or physical concerns. Just you can't see what I have seen standing on the mountaintop or at 60,000 feet and not have it start to come together in your brain as an offering
Mm.
that might be helpful, that just doesn't exist. And by weaving it together with the adverse childhood experiences, um, understanding that we have, which, I wrote a best-selling book about Childhood Disrupted, about all adverse childhood experiences, how they affect us, what we can do about it. But to see there's this tool that we're not
Yeah.
using that we could be using, especially. I taught this program during the pandemic to first responders online. And to see the relief that it gave them in this highest time of stress, and to families. I taught it to families overseas in war-torn areas. To see that response and that relief that they held within them, this deep well of internal resources, by understanding their own story. Yeah, when
Yeah.
that publisher called and asked me to do it, I was like, "Heck yes, let's
This
do
was a
it."
yes for you. It was an absolute
It was a
yes. Yeah.
yes. It was a yes.
Well, we're gonna get into more about ACEs. So if people don't understand what that is, we're gonna talk about that in a minute. But let me just ask you about this first, because you told me that writing to heal is as powerful as meditation and that it's a vastly underutilized tool. And I know therapists who use writing as a way to help people heal from things like chronic illness, for example.
Sure.
So just say a little bit more about how writing can help us heal.
Well, so what's really interesting is that writing to heal, and again, I want to be clear, especially when we have very carefully curated neuroscience-based prompts to do this work, right? Because we want to be doing it in a way where we're guided through a process. And then on the other side of that first part of the process, we're also building up new ways of seeing our story for resilience. So I want to be very clear. This is a curated process. This is a very science-based process. But when we do it in this way, a couple of things begin to happen in the brain. I'll just tick them off as quickly as I can. One, a lot of our negative self-beliefs get caught in an area of the brain called the default mode network. Nobody has to remember that, but it's just an area of the brain that when you've had a lot of stress or adversity, it really locks down around these negative core self-beliefs, especially if they happen in childhood. Writing unlocks that area and allows it to connect up to 267 other areas in the brain. I just want to apologize. I have my 15-year-old dog here with me who's sick, and you're going to hear her in the background, and I'm sorry for that.
Well, thank you for
Yeah.
telling us, and
Yes,
I
it's
hope
just
she's getting comfort being next to you.
she's comfortable being next to me. She won't sit anywhere else right now. So anyway, I just want to apologize to your listeners. But anyway, so that area of the brain that we need to connect up and integrate with 267 other areas, like critical thinking, like, does this make sense? Like, is this really happening? Like, why am I beating up on myself like this? Or what can I do about this? Or how do I get out of this head state? Or how do I respond to the teenager in front of me in a wise and helpful and useful and true way? All that's gone. All that's gone. Writing to heal helps the brain to connect up again. It adds to what we're looking for when we're looking for resilience, which is called neural integration. And we have very good studies to show this. We also know that it allows us a meditative state. It looks like a meditative state. And part of what's so special about it is you are in something very close to a meditative state in the brain. You're in the present moment. You've got your pencil or your pen or whatever you're using to write. That's very present. That involves your physical body, your mind, but you're also delving a little bit into the past safely because you're in the present. And you're creating a document that you can return to in the future to underline or highlight or continue, which is what I'm doing with the ACEs Guided Journal. Continue and deepen and learn more and more about what connections between the past and the present are so sticky for you. By that, I mean, when certain things happen, you just can't let it go. There are reasons for that. Okay, there are reasons why we each get sticky about different things. And we can begin to see what's really sticky and heated and red hot for us. And what do we need to understand about how that shades and shadows the present? And when we understand that, the brain begins to let go of it. It's like the brain says, I see you. I see what you're doing there. And we begin to be able to move out of those ruminative states, out of that self-shame and blame, out of that blaming and judging of others, out of that fear state, and into the resilience of, okay, here's what I could do to reframe that. Here's what I can do to feel better. Here's how my story makes sense. It makes sense to me. And that heals the brain.
Yeah. Well, I did do about half of the book, I have to tell you, and I found it so interesting, and I really understand how, like I knew a lot of it. This is stuff I've
Of course,
learned,
that's
I've
you
studied for a
know.
long time, but there was something still so powerful about answering questions. We're going to talk more about this, but I want to open up the phone lines. You're listening to About Health on KPFA 94.1 FM. I'm your host, Rona Renner, and my guest is Donna Jackson Nakazawa. She's an award-winning science journalist and the author of 8 books exploring the connections between emotion, adversity, and well-being. Her most recent book is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Guided Journal, Neuroscience-Based Writing Practice to Rewire Your Brain for Trauma. It's based on Donna's popular narrative Writing to Heal program. You can join this conversation by calling 800-958-9008. You can also email me your questions at nurserona@kpfa.org. 1-800-958-9008. Donna, I learned about the ACEs work many years ago. When I first met Dr. Vincent Felitti, I was fascinated by the research he did while he was working at Kaiser Permanente in San Diego. He realized that his patients' adverse childhood experiences, such as neglect or sexual or physical abuse, were impacting their health and
Yes.
well-being as adults. And he first noticed this with obese patients in a weight loss clinic who successfully lost weight but then gained it back again after they dropped out of the program. And he started to ask questions and then realized that the weight could be a coping mechanism for things like depression or anxiety or fear. And then Dr. Faliti and Dr. Robert Anda from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention went on to survey childhood trauma experiences of over 17,000 Kaiser Permanente patient volunteers. So, Donna, you've studied this so much and you've written about it. Tell our listeners about some of the understanding about ACEs and maybe a brief overview of the categories that are used to determine a person's score.
Sure. So I worked with Vincent and Robert Anda in my book, Childhood Disrupted, and they were really pioneers in that they were the first people in the medical community to have the bravery to ask whether or not certain experiences in childhood could have some sort of long-lasting effect on physical health. They were just looking at physical health at the time. Since then, we have very good research about early adversity and mental health, but at the time, and one of the things that made their questionnaire so amazing was that they weren't just asking about what we traditionally, and I want to be clear, this started in 1995, okay? This research, they were 1995, and they asked whether or not the following 10 experiences that happened to individuals. Of course, they were looking at things we traditionally consider to be trauma: sexual abuse as a child, physical abuse as a child. But they also asked about what we consider to be broader, more common: living room variety, household dysfunction. Did a parent regularly make fun of you or put you down? Did you feel like nobody in your family had your back or thought you were special? Did you have any kind of like physical neglect? Not physical abuse, physical neglect. Nobody took you to the doctor when you were sick, or maybe you didn't have a coat when it was cold outside. Emotional neglect. There was no reliable adult to turn to when you felt unsafe. Did you lose a parent to divorce or separation or death? Did you have a parent or family member who was incarcerated? Was there someone in your home, a caregiver, who was depressed or had a mental health concern? Was there a caregiver in your home who was incarcerated for some reason? So it went on, these 10 questions, but it was the first time anyone thought to ask, could emotional turmoil, a sense of really unsafety in childhood for any reason, lead to a greater likelihood of physical problems in adulthood? And the findings were astonishing. First, 2/3 of people, respondents, had suffered from some category of adverse childhood experiences. In addition to that, those individuals, especially those who had three or more, were more likely to suffer from depression and anxiety. They were more likely to suffer from cancer, heart disease. And this statistic really blew me away when I was doing the research. For women who had three or more categories of ACEs, their likelihood of being hospitalized with an autoimmune disease so serious that it required hospitalization was 60% higher than for other women in the study. I could go on.
Yeah.
6 or more was related to a loss of 20 years in the lifespan. So this was huge at the time. And of course, that's why I wrote a book about it when this the study came out in the late 90s and sort of got buried. People didn't pay a lot of attention to it. Psychiatry just wasn't ready for this idea that emotional struggles in childhood could cause physical problems in
Right.
adulthood. they just couldn't sign on for that. Now, of course, it's well accepted.
Well,
Um,
I think Dr. Nadine Burke had a lot to do with that. If
yes,
anyone wants to
yes,
see an amazing TED Talk on this topic,
for sure.
Dr. Nadine Burke is. And I just want to mention there's so much to talk about regarding ACEs, but I want to say that I appreciated in your book the expanded ACEs checklist because
I wanted to say
research,
that
yeah,
too. So go ahead.
researches
Please go
really
ahead.
show that there are other adversities. And I think in this current climate, it's so important to say,
So
too,
important.
that, people who are growing up in a violent neighborhood, people who have been experiencing war and, fear every day of their life, people who have medical trauma and facing racism and discrimination, all of that is now understood as being also a part of what is called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how important it is to grapple with all of that as well.
I spent a lot of time on that in the early parts of the book because really our new understanding of ACEs is in a way quite simple. Something happened repeatedly. It was chronic. It caused a sense of unsafety. And there weren't enough adults in the adult world to ameliorate the effects of it. And that could be because substandard schools, structural racism, those things that happen each and every day, or growing up, as we said, with household dysfunction, walking in your house after school and not feeling safe for whatever reason. So all of those things create a chronic sense of what we all know: fight, flight, flop, fawn, freeze, and the nervous system becomes dysregulated.
Yeah.
And over time, that affects the architecture of the brain and the development of the immune system and the nervous system. But so that is sort of ACEs 101, folks.
Thank
Quick
you. And
version.
there's so much more. Again, if people just do a search for ACEs, you'll find so much information and also different ways to look at your own ACEs. But I want to start taking calls. We have Rhonda with us from San Diego on the line. Thank you for waiting so much. And you're on the air with us, Rhonda.
Yes, hi. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, just speak up a little bit.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Hi. Yes, hi. I just want to send, first of all, thank you for this very important show, Rona. And Donna, I send all my healing thoughts to you and everybody, every person that has gone through trauma in their life, which is most of us. I just want to draw your attention maybe to the precautionary principle that we try to use in climate and other sections of our lives of society. And I think the biggest prevention in avoiding present and future traumas is to address the militarization of the world and how the military and the weapons industry has created millions of refugees, millions of deaths in the world. As you can see right now, the most fragrant one is in Gaza,
Yes.
in Palestine and the West Bank.
Yes.
So where we have, a Lancet is saying approximately 200, they don't know exactly, 200,000 people died, half of whom are children. That's the composition of the Gaza Strip. And the rest that are still under siege and still being bombed day and night we have 11 and 12-year-olds picking up debris of their
Yes.
of the massacred dead by the Israeli bombs, U.S.-made Israeli bombs.
And did you have a question, Rhonda? I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you have a question?
I do have a.
Yeah.
Yes, my question is when you addressed Donna, when you said like you're talking about this in schools and different locations, which is very important. But maybe I would imagine that half of the traumas are also with people that are homeless, and how can we prevent that? And also people that the refugees in the world. So do you have a plan to address the military and our elected officials who time and again keep on sending bombs to Israel and other places?
Yes, Rhonda, it's not really what we're talking about today, but I appreciate you bringing this into light for us to never forget and to all realize that not only are we addressing the the deaths in Gaza and in Palestine and in Ukraine and Russia and other places because of militarism. So there are the deaths, and then there's the trauma, the deep trauma that the people who are living, face. So all these children, have lost families. They have, adverse experiences that most of us can't even imagine. So yes, I don't have an answer for you. I have, heartbreak and sadness around the trauma that's all over the world. So again, thank you for bringing this up. Donna, is there anything you want to be able to say regarding this?
The work that I was able to do with refugees in Ukraine was very meaningful to me. Not this program, but with another program that I do, and I think that I really appreciate her bringing this up.
Yes. Thank you very much. We have another call from Cheryl from San Jose. Cheryl, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. Sorry, it's getting a little emotional. I come from a background where I was adopted at 6 months old, was in foster care for 3 months before that, and was adopted into a family where they had two natural boys. And my mom, she came from a traumatic background and just, should not have had kids. And she was 25. She had her first child at 18, second child at 19, and it was very bad. There was a lot of, my one brother turned into a drug addict. He tried to hang himself at 5 years old from the north tree in the backyard. My other brother, it's really hard. She ended up with me more because I never fought back. It was a lot of physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse. I mean, there's just so much there. And my one brother, the one that passed away, he and some friends of his tried to get me and a friend to play strip Monopoly at like 6 years old. And
so this is raising up a lot of your experiences, all the different adverse experiences that you've had. Do you have a particular question for Donna?
I just, I wish it was more. People need to be more aware. People out there and in schools and things. There were times in my senior year when I went to school with scratches and came in late because things were happening at home, and it's like I don't understand how nobody noticed or knew. Like I graduated in '87, so it was a long time ago. I think things are different. I have a lot there. If there's anybody that's ever interested in me participating in some sort of study, I feel like I have a lot to share, right? Being in, adopted, but in a family that's crossed there, and just, I am married. It's very hard. I have no female friends. I can't seem to just. It's so hard to trust. Obviously.
Yes.
And I just, every day is a struggle. Every single day is a struggle for me.
And Cheryl, I just want to appreciate so much what you said about how could people not know? How could people not see? That idea of being so, ignored for the pain and the suffering. And I want to say that Donna's work and Donna's book doesn't take the place of professional help, of course, but there may be a way in which this journal could also give you some tools, because it has tools for breathing and for looking at your resilience and things like that. Donna, let me have you respond to Cheryl as well.
Sure. So first of all, I really thank you for being so vulnerable, and I'm sure there's so many people who have had these feelings or are having them now. And I think most individuals who've suffered from childhood adversity, especially to the degree that you have, know how you feel, and yet we don't talk about it. And I'm really sorry that no one saw it while it was happening. And this is a part of our understanding about the effects of adversity is something that you, it seems like to me, know in yourselves. And it's that idea that not only did it happen, but as it happened, there was no one for you to turn to. No one saw, you weren't seen, you weren't known, you weren't held. Nobody was able to say to you, it's okay, we'll get through this. And that means that something really difficult occurs. And the difficult thing that occurs is that you don't get the opportunity as a child to make that essential leap that it's not your fault. And so I would just encourage you to this work, maybe doing the journal with a trusted therapist or behavioral health specialist of some type, or even taking it into your doctor and telling them you're going to do it. Because what I'm trying to do is to help you make that essential leap through these science-based practices, which it is possible to do, that it wasn't your fault, that you're not to blame, that the problem was never inside of you. The problem was outside of you. And to be able to make that leap can be life-changing. And I want that for you. And I've seen it. I know it's possible. I work with individuals who have been through terrible things. I've done work for, well, it doesn't matter, but in any event, people go through terrible things in life, and to not be seen or held as a child going through them changes us. But the brain is forever neuroplastic. It
Yeah.
is always changing and shifting. And it's this work we do on our own behalf so that we can have that loyalty to self, wake up on our own side, that makes that neuroplasticity real and gives us the resilience that you so richly deserve.
Yes, thank you. And Cheryl, again, thank you for calling. And that's where we need to also tell other people our stories and talk to people and get that kind of support. And sometimes just having someone listen to you and give you a hug. And I think in your book, this workbook, the Adverse Childhood Experience Guided Journal, part of what you're doing is helping people, in a sense, give themselves a hug, and I think that is very, very powerful. Maybe you could say a little bit more, Donna, about the brain's neuroplasticity. I think it's an
Sure.
important piece for people to understand that with certain breathing and exercises and being able to bring awareness that there's this way in which the brain can actually change.
So, one thing that we see, and the reason that I put together these step-by-step writing prompts coupled with, mindfulness, visualization, drawing exercises, because for some people, these drawing exercises are the thing that they go, aha, I heard from someone the other day, it was like, oh, I did this one drawing exercise, and like things came to me after 64 years that I started to understand. So we're getting at the brain in various ways. And because I'm neuroscience based, I want to get to the brain in these various ways and take people a little deeper into their story. But one of the things that we understand is that, trauma is very much lodged in the brain. And we used to think many years ago that the brain was only able to change and like develop new pathways and rewire and refire until late adolescence. And then we went, oh, well, looks like it's still really happening until about 26. And then we went, oh, you know what? It's really happening until the late 20s. And then a bunch of studies came out and said, guys, this is lifelong. This is lifelong. We fire and wire up new pathways. We can see it. We have lots of studies on meditation and how we, in a very short period of time, just 8 weeks, meditators start to form new pathways for resilience and calm. We see the same thing in individuals who do writing to heal practices, that we start to see new areas of the brain wire and fire up. And this makes sense, right? Because if our stories are lodged in the brain, in these areas of the brain, and negative self-beliefs tend to be lodged in this default mode network, which I talked about earlier, and if we can get some wiring and firing up going between other areas of the brain that help us with our interpretations of what's happening and what happened in the past, with our perceptions of what's happening inside of us, if we can begin to do that work, we begin to see what you might think of as habits that weren't good for you kind of disappear and new habits form. You start to be able to recognize your own feelings and fears and kind of spot them as they're happening. You're able to more accurately perceive and interpret events as they're happening around you so that you're less reactive because you go, oh, I see why that's getting me right now because, I've started to understand my story. I now get it, why I feel this way. When I feel this way, you're able to pivot and voice what you want and need, even when you're under severe stress. These are all pathways in the brain, Rona. This is all neural firing that you create. And you can focus on what you need and require just to feel calm, centered, and reground yourself in your most challenging moments so that things don't knock you over quite so easily.
Thank you for that. You're listening to About Health on KPFA. I'm Rona Renner. My guest is Donna Jackson Nakazawa. She's an award-winning science journalist, author of 8 books. Her recent book is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Guided Journal, and it's based on her Writing to Heal program. If you have a question for her, give us a call, 800-958-9008. You can also email me at nurserona@kpfa.org. I was thinking, Donna, it might be really useful to talk about some of the breathing exercises because I know that, and I'm still feeling from the call from Cheryl and the breathing exercises that you put in your book have really helped me over the years. I've used some of them, because they're ones I've learned about. But in stressful situations, I was just in a stressful situation recently, and I found that if I just followed my breath, had deep breath from my belly. I even counted, so that my exhales were longer than my inhales. It just really, really makes a difference in those times when we're under a lot of stress. So maybe you can take one of your breathing exercises and share it with our listeners.
Sure. So one that I like to do a lot is I came up with this myself one day just because I do have a fairly stressful life and living with chronic illness and also running my own business and deadlines and lectures and getting on stages and managing a family. And as I said earlier, my 15-year-old dog is really sick. So there are lots of things that come at us in life, and I have this history of early adversity. And so I'm a little more wired, a little more hair triggered for big responses. And that's just something we see in people with a history of adversity. So when we start to see that we're a little bit dysregulated and we begin to notice that, something that helps me that I've developed is what I call a 5-point breath. And I can get I can speed up a lot in life to kind of get through things and, make things happen and meet deadlines. And it just really helped me when I developed it to just sort of slow it all down and come back. And so it's very, very simple. It's just as you breathe in, you're noticing these 5 points in your body. You're noticing as the breath comes in your nostrils and the back of your throat and down through your belly and your lower abdomen. And now feel it all the way up your spine. And then a long, slow exhale. And I like to imagine a kind of golden light coming in. But for me, when I do that and I feel it in these different points in my body, it slows me down because I'm focusing on those points in my body. I'm becoming somatic which is very good for our nervous system. And I can't speed up my breath if I'm doing that practice. Another one is a heart breath where, you can take in a heart breath and you can imagine the sort of golden light coming up from above you and down into your heart. Put your hands over your heart and up from the ground beneath you and into your heart, and hold your hands over your heart. And now feel that breath coming out of your heart. Exhale to the front and the back and the sides. And do each of those 5 times. See what you like. I have probably a dozen breath practices in the book that are uniquely designed for slowing down the brain and the nervous system and bringing in a sense of calm.
Thank you. I'm just sitting here too calm. I have to
I
get
know,
myself
me too.
geared
I was
up
like,
here a
what
little bit.
are we talking about? But those, I will tell you, they work for me.
Yeah,
I'll do one more. You want one more?
sure.
Okay, so this is called the psoas release. All of these just take 2 minutes, 2 minutes start to finish. So the psoas release is, you're just sit wherever you are. If you're sitting, you do kind of have to be sitting to do this. And take a deep breath in, turn and look over your left shoulder. You can't see me, I'm doing it. Look up and down. Turn to the front, take breath in, look up and down. Exhale, turn to the right, look over your right shoulder, look up and down. Exhale, come back to the front. Notice anything different if you did it with me? You will, because guess why? When we are stressed out, our body is in fight, flight, flop, freeze, meaning it's expecting something kind of physical to happen in our real environment, and the brain doesn't differentiate between something happening in your head, your mind drama, and something happening in real life. Doesn't differentiate. You think it would? No, doesn't. And what this does is it turns off the fight, flight, freeze, stress response, because your brain clocks that there's nothing happening, that this is all happening in your mind drama. You're replaying old events. You're worrying about things that haven't happened yet. You're replaying a conversation that you had with your partner earlier that day that, didn't feel right to you. And your brain literally lets go because you're like, whoa, wait a minute, that's not happening right now. And your nervous system drops down and grounds.
It's amazing how these practices really help. I was looking at our wonderful board operator engineer here, Kirsten Thomas, and I were doing it together, right? It felt really good.
Kirsten, what did she think? Thumbs up, thumbs
She's
down?
thumbs up. Yeah, she's giving me a
Okay,
thumbs up. But I remember being in a sailboat in Greece. We were the crew, and anyway, it's a long story I won't go into, but it was a very dangerous situation. We had a couple of hours in 40-knot winds, and it was crazy and it was scary, and I just ohmed, like there was nothing I could do. So I did Om Mani Padme Om, something that I knew, which is basically a long Om, and you mentioned it in your book, and it just kept me calm and it kept me feeling safe. So I really have learned over the years that these practices are they're like medicine for our brain. And I just think they're amazing.
Or physical therapy for the brain. And I
Yeah.
heard from someone this morning who's doing 4 pages a day, and he was like, wow, this is, it's 5 minutes. I don't have time, but wow, 5 minutes a day. And, 4 pages a day, 5 minutes a day, it's physical therapy for the brain. And,
Yes.
you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to hire anybody. It's right there.
Yeah. Let's we have a little time left. If anyone has a question, please feel free now. This is a good time to call 1-800-958-9008. Donna, maybe we can talk a little bit about couple of things. The importance of positive self-talk
Yeah.
to rewire our brains. And I also just want you to say a little bit also about the positive childhood experiences and resiliency. Some
Yeah.
ways in which we can feel really supported by friends or non-parent adults, and how they're protective against adversity when we're young, and also remembering those things, and then something about positive self-talk.
Sure. So one of the things that we know, we have very good work. Actually, the researcher has become a good friend of mine over the years, Christina Bethel at Johns Hopkins, was the first person to explore, well, can some of these experiences that we're talking about, these negative adverse childhood experiences, be ameliorated in some way by positive things that happen in childhood? And certainly as parents, I have several children, and for all the parents out there, you certainly hope so, because you can't prevent every bad thing from happening. And the hope is that you'll be able to be that caring, nurturing adult who can help your kids through the tough things, or there will be enough things in place that are positive for your child that even if really bad things you can't prevent happen, they're going to be wired for resilience. So some of those, so she indeed found that to be true. And that just having 3 to 5 positive childhood experiences was 50% preventative against depression and anxiety as these kids went into adulthood. Positive childhood experiences in her research included things like um, knowing that you had an adult to turn to, who you could talk to about anything when something very, very difficult occurred. Having 2 or more non-parent adults who you felt had your back or noticed you. Often for kids, because I do a lot of work in schools, these are teachers. I'll have them write down on Post-it notes, like, who can you go to if you can't get to mom or dad, as part of the work that I do with them. They often write down teachers. For some, it's the guidance counselor, or it's the poetry, the teacher who saw they were good at poetry, or the coach who saw, hey, you know what? Why don't I help you? I think you'd be a good pole vaulter. Those moments of being
Yes.
seen, kids never forget. I have to tell you, almost every lecture I give, I talk about this because people tell me their stories. And we never forget the neighbor who said, hey, you want to come and bake bread with me on Fridays? Maybe she didn't say, I can see your mom is not okay, or I can see you're not okay. But you knew that she knew because of the way that she treated you.
Yeah.
So being that adult is so important. Other positive
And
childhood.
Donna, I'm just going to cut you off here because all of a sudden we just got a lot of calls, and I think I could fit in a
Okay, let's
couple.
do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so let me try that. Let me go to Greg in Palo Alto. Hi, Greg. You're on About Health.
Hello. I'm going to have to try and get the book because I want to read about this. I definitely have problems with PTSD, and I think it's really unfortunate in my experience that in the healthcare system that I mean, at Stanford and Sutter and Palo Alto, that this kind of approach isn't taken by people.
Right.
I agree.
They just,
I agree.
it's all medication, and I mean, I even had
agree.
a doctor tell me the other day she didn't think I had PTSD because it's overdiagnosed, and I thought, wow, I mean,
Oh
really
boy.
crazy. So,
I'm so sorry
anyway,
about that, but I know this might be something really interesting for you, Greg. Give it a try. I think you can find it. It's from New Harbinger Press, and again, it doesn't
It's
take the
wherever books
place.
are sold. Yeah.
It doesn't take the place of other, counseling and other work, but it may really work for you. And I really appreciated you calling in over the years. So thank you, Greg. Let me just try and get in one more call. We have Michael from Hayward. Hi, Michael.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm sorry again that I'm arriving late. I was out doing other stuff, but I really appreciate the comments and the perspectives of possibly working with some other types of, handling with breath control and all that, because I have to relate to my own PTSD from my first child's birth experience, which was not the best. We had her at home. She went into not cardiac arrest, but wasn't able to breathe. And fortunately, we got her into a hospital. And but I think that created a lot of PTSD for myself and my wife as well. But we did engage in a lot of retroactive kind of therapy along those lines. And just want to reiterate that I think it's really good to maybe press the medical industry to start looking at other methods. Anyway, my daughter was diagnosed with very high-functioning Asperger's when she was about 4 or 5 years old, and then we were caught in the dilemma of how to present that to her, work with her on that. And so she's survived and done pretty well in her life. She's really a good reader and a lot of things, but there's still this slight backstory that we haven't resolved. And my wife has passed away a few years ago.
Yes.
I was on the show last
yes,
week.
Michael, it's you. Yes, thank you again for calling in last week and for this week. And this might be interesting for you because of also the caregiving and the trauma that you experienced. Also taking care of your wife as she was dying. It might be really interesting for you or anyone else in your family to check out Donna's book. And I've got to say goodbye again. I got to hang up on you again, Michael. I'm sorry. But thank you for calling. Thank you so much. And Donna Jackson Nakazawa, thank you for your time and the important work you're doing. We could have talked for a few more hours. How can folks find out about your book and all your programs?
So DonnaJacksonNakazawa.com, you'll find everything there. And the Adverse Childhood Experiences Guided Journal is available wherever books are sold. And deep bow to Michael real quick, because my son was in intensive care after he was born. And it sticks with you a long time. And doing this work has helped me a lot as a parent. And so here's to all the people out there who are looking for a little bit of relief. I hope this book is helpful.
Thank you. And thank you for everything you've done. I hope our paths cross again, Donna.
I hope so. And I wish you all good things, Rona. It's been a nice journey with you over these many decades.
Yes. Many thanks to our listeners and callers. My gratitude always to Kristen Thomas, our engineer at the controls. To listen to this show again and previous shows, you can go to my website at nurserona.com or to kpfa.org on the archives page. May you be safe, may you be healthy, and live with ease as best you can. This is Nurse Rona saying goodbye until next time.
Love about my role here at KPFA is I get to hear directly from you, our listeners. My name is Italina, Donor Relations Manager here at the station, and I get to hear things like, thank you for being here for our community. And we get to be here thanks to loyal listeners like you. So help us continue to be here by making a meaningful donation today. And know there is more than one way to donate. You can make a qualified charitable distribution from an IRA, you can donate stocks, you can even add KPFA as a beneficiary. Thank you for being really thoughtful about this. Thank you to our monthly sustainers and to our generous one-time donors. Donate at kpfa.org or email members@kpfa.org if you have a question about donating in other ways, or if you'd like to increase your monthly donation. My name is Italina, here for Community Powered Radio, here for you.
I'm Amy Goodman. Join Democracy Now! For our expanded 2-hour daily coverage from the Democratic National Convention. We'll be at the DNC in Chicago from August 19th to 23rd. We'll be reporting from the streets to the corporate suites to the convention floor, bringing you the voices of people from the top to the bottom, inside and out. That's Democracy Now! Breaking with Convention. Tune in.
You're listening to 94.1 KPFA Berkeley, 89.3 KPFB Berkeley, and 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, 97.5 K248BR Santa Cruz, 94.3 K232FC in Monterey, and always online at kpfa.org.